Hey everybody, this is RRPG here, and I'm here to present another 2 cents video on the 2 cents block for you all. And boy, Capcom, did you really get yourself in quite a pickle. I mean, I really adored you as a third-party developer and publisher back when I was growing up. But now, since as of recent, with what all you have done, you really have entered yourself into this really tight bind, which you can only hope for someone to actually buy you out. Now, what am I talking about, you might ask? Well, it looks like Capcom has decided to have somebody else buy them out, or they are up for purchase, essentially. And their takeover defense strategy, which has been around for quite some time since they have been losing money within the company, it has been up for, as I said, has been up for quite some time, as they did not want anybody outside of them to be purchased. But now shareholders have just recently meted with each other and have voted to end that policy to allow the company to be bought out by someone bigger. Someone bigger like a first-party division like, Nintendo, Sony, or possibly even Microsoft. And the meaning behind this is that if someone purchases at least 51% of their shares, the Capcom will become exclusive to that outside buyer. Now, my thoughts on this. It's, as you probably heard from the beginning of this video, it's sad that Capcom had entered this grim fate, because back when I was growing up from the 80s and into the 90s, they were a very prominent third-party company that really showed that they were very passionate with making video games with the right people. But now they've entered this grim fate because of what they've done throughout the past few years. But it is probably best that they've entered in this predicament for numerous reasons. One, they changed significantly where they only cared about maximizing profits in this day and age from profitable franchises. Franchises like Resident Evil, Street Fighter, Devil May Cry, Monster Hunter, and a few of the others where Capcom only cared about shelving sequel after sequel after sequel after sequel after sequel after sequel of games within those franchises, instead of focusing on putting out newer games from more dormant franchises instead of the more popular ones, or just shelving off the more dormant ones into obscurity and only caring about the ones that they feel that only make some money at this point. So yeah, what Capcom has been doing as of recent has just been not working. I mean, sure, it may have been like that. They've only made sequel after sequel of Street Fighter 2 back then, but you got to remember that there were a lot more other games that came out aside from just that, and many of them were from many different franchises from many different genres. So that's why it worked back like during the NES and SNES days, but now it's completely the opposite. And many other games have been westernized, where the magic of the original games or the original franchises have become lost. I mean, seriously, who thought it was a good idea to make Resident Evil 6 have 3 different gameplay styles, where most of them actually trended towards more of the gameplay of Gears of War, instead of being a survival horror game that the series has came out to be since its conception. And who would have thought that it was a good idea to have Lost Planet 3 be developed by Spark Unlimited, which, if you see in the footage, Yaiba Ninja Gaiden Z was also developed by Spark Unlimited, mostly where Team Ninja and Concept actually just made most of the development effort come from that studio. Yeah, really smart move there, Tecmo Koei. And it's just some of the other games that were westernized, like Dark Void, even though it was an original IP, you gotta admit that Dark Void Zero was actually a much better game. But Dark Void, DMC Devil May Cry, a lot of others have been westernized from Western developers, or some of them have been westernized within the internal studios in Japan, and they really have become a former shell of themselves where they aren't that fun or enjoyable anymore. And many of their games we wanted to see make a return end up being on the mobile platforms like the iOS or the iPhone, or even smartphones for that matter. I mean, I was very excited when Breath of Fire was getting an official 6th installment after the train wreck of what happened with Breath of Fire 5 Dragon Quarter. That was like nearly about 10 years ago, but now we're seeing a new game. But the bad news is that it's ending up on the iOS and smartphones. Yeah, I want to actually see games like that end up on true handheld devices like the 3DS, or maybe even the PlayStation Vita for that matter. Not on a mobile platform where you can only care about microtransactions, which hasn't really worked well for a business to profit from that type of thing. So yeah, as you can tell, I'm pretty saddened and pretty angry at Capcom that they've entered into this very bad, tragic setting. But if someone has to buy them, I feel that there's only one company who knows how to buy a company right and actually can save Capcom for that matter. And that company is Nintendo. Now, before you bash on me and say why Nintendo is not the best suit, or say why Sony and Microsoft are the best suit, and why I believe that Nintendo is the better candidate, here's why I feel that is the case. Number one, this would help Nintendo ground leverage after the failure of the Capcom 5 on GameCube, meaning Capcom had 5 GameCube titles that were supposed to be exclusive for the GameCube, which were Beautiful Joe, PN03, Killer 7, the unreleased Dead Phoenix, and Resident Evil 4. And pretty much all of them, except for Resident Evil 4, ended up being commercial failures on the GameCube because it didn't turn out to be profitable. And 3 out of 4 of those released titles actually ended up on the PlayStation 2 after Capcom has betrayed Nintendo with their agreement. But the only one that actually did profit throughout that whole thing was actually Resident Evil 4. So, yeah. Nintendo actually purchasing Capcom could actually ground leverage between both the companies to where they can build up their relationship even for the better. And they could actually work on bigger and better projects and get some of those unreleased or canceled projects out for a new platform or even on existing platforms. Now, number 2. This move would actually help the company help Nintendo retain exclusive rights on the Monster Hunter and Ace Attorney franchises. And as of recent, Monster Hunter has been mostly appearing on the Nintendo platforms, with all new iterations, whether if they are exclusive or multi-platform, usually end up on the Nintendo platforms. And the Ace Attorney franchises, with the most recent entry, which was Dual Destinies on the 3DS, have mostly started out on a Nintendo handheld. And the Ace Attorney games, the original trilogy, ended up being on the Game Boy Advance before it came out on the DS, where Miles Edgeworth Ace Attorney Investigations 1 and 2, as well as Apollo Justice Ace Attorney, actually ended up on the Nintendo DS and started out on those platforms. And yes, some of those games actually did end up on the WiiWare and the smartphone and iPhone platforms, or the mobile platforms, but when it came to gaming handhelds, Ace Attorney actually ended up on a Nintendo handheld, like the DS or the 3DS. So if Nintendo actually buys Capcom, they can obtain and retain and keep those exclusive rights to those franchises on their platforms. That would be a good move for them. Number 3, many of the mature franchises can help Nintendo evolve more as a video game company that is for everybody, and not just for the family type. As of recent, many people have been complaining at Nintendo where many of their franchises or their games have been more like family-oriented. And I don't use the word kiddie because I find that to be derogative. I say more family-oriented because none of them were hardly any mature franchises, or hardly any games that were developed by Nintendo were actually mature. But mature games that came from Capcom, like Dino Crisis, Chaos Legion, Devil May Cry, Dead Rising, and some of those others, even Lost Planet. If mature franchises like those can end up on Nintendo platforms, then they can evolve more as a company that, as I said, that's for everybody, including the matures, the teens, and even everyone. Number 4, this could help Nintendo alleviate the numerous droughts of software that they have on their platforms. And as of recent, with the Wii U and the 3DS, there have been numerous and constant droughts of software, whether if it's from first-party or third-party games. And speaking of third-party games, there haven't been a whole lot of really quality third-party titles that strive on the Wii U. There's only a few that I can think of that actually did well for the Wii U, which are Rayman Legends, Need for Speed Most Wanted You, and even Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, even though Need for Speed Most Wanted You sold poorly, but the others, they actually managed to sell very well because they were really good quality games, even if they were third-party platforms. You know, with Capcom games ending up on Nintendo platforms throughout the whole time, if Nintendo actually got that 51% of their shares, this could alleviate their numerous droughts, for that matter. This would actually help them get more content out instead of having to keep us waiting until their next big first-party IP or first-party game comes out, whatever month or whatever time span it could be. Number 5. If any company has shown respect to beloved franchises from third parties, it has been Nintendo. Mega Man is in the new Super Smash Bros. For Wii U and 3DS, and his appearance in that game has been the prime example because of Capcom's ignorance and how they are not putting out a new Mega Man game, which we want on a yearly basis, which Keiji Inafune, one of the fathers, or the main father of that series, has always put out a new Mega Man game within every year, mostly. So seeing Capcom not doing that type of thing, since they're only concerned about maximizing profits based on, the more ambitious and more heavily developed franchises, yeah, it's really, really sad that they're treating their mascot like garbage at this moment. And I want to see Nintendo actually try to revive Mega Man and possibly bring out some more 8-bit and 16-bit iterations of some of those long-forgotten franchises. Or better yet, have Nintendo help Capcom make Mega Man Legends 3 for the 3DS, which got canceled, and many people were actually very furious and enraged at Capcom for what they did. So if Nintendo actually helped Capcom with funding the money to make sure that Mega Man Legends 3 got made for the 3DS, then they'd make a killing right there. And number 6, or number 6 for that matter, Nintendo wouldn't necessarily, this is one thing that I would have to say, is that some people might say that Nintendo would need to have a lot of money to buy all the shares within Capcom. Well, let's be frank here. Nintendo wouldn't necessarily need to buy all of Capcom's shares as of right now, as they only just need to grab that 51% in order to make Capcom a second-party company within Nintendo. So if they just immediately got that 51%, then boom, Capcom's officially under Nintendo's banner. And, if Capcom decides to make games available on multiple platforms, then they'd have to make sure that they put their games on Nintendo platforms for that matter, too. So Nintendo can buy out the 51% of Capcom's shares, and throughout time, when they start gaining more money, they can gradually continue to capture Capcom shares to where they get the full 100% in order to make Capcom a first-party division within Nintendo. So there's always has to be a start where a company or two companies can grow if someone buys out their stock or their shares or whatever. And then if they manage to buy out all the shares, then boom, there you go. They're all on equal sides. Number 7. Capcom games have had a strong leg on Nintendo platforms throughout many years, and even as of most recent. Most of the games that we have seen from Capcom in the past that actually worked well or have actually struck well in quality have been on the Nintendo platforms, from the NES, the SNES, and possibly a few on the GameCube that actually were really great in quality aside from sales, and even some of the most recent ones like Zack and Wiki, the Resident Evil, the rail shooter games, Umbrella Chronicles, Darkside Chronicles, Okami Den on the DS, even Mega Man 9 and 10 for that matter. Capcom games, especially the retro ones and some of the more popular ones, have actually had a really strong stand on Nintendo's handheld and console fronts. So it would only make sense that Nintendo actually buys them for that matter, just based on that alone. And even the Ace Attorney games and Monster Hunter games as of recent have had Nintendo do very well with, or have done very well on the Nintendo platforms to where Capcom can actually do well. So, as I said, Nintendo getting Capcom would probably be a dream come true if they actually take this approach. And number 8, Nintendo could help Capcom revive and bring about older and dormant franchises to get more exposure. Older and dormant franchises like Darkstalkers, Rival Schools, Dino Crisis, Chaos Legion, Clock Tower. Some of those others that we haven't even heard Capcom put out for quite some time, as they pretty much fade into obscurity, like the Ghost and Goblin series, even Demon's Crest, or the Gargoyle's Quest games, or possibly even some of those Disney Capcom games, even though that's more of licensing issues. But with the more recent release of DuckTales Remastered, it shows that even older and dormant franchises can get better exposure in this day and age, or they still have a strong leg within gaming as of right now. So Nintendo helping Capcom, bringing about some of those older franchises that we haven't even heard about for quite a long time, and getting new games out of them, then yeah, that would definitely help Capcom, try to get back into the quality of making really good games instead of them having to be stuck with their bottom line. So, in the end, this is all I have to say for the matter. I mean, these are my final thoughts. Capcom's hubris pretty much has gotten to them, and I think this was something that we all knew was coming. But if I do feel that there's one company that can save them from this hellhole that they've gotten themselves into, it's probably Nintendo. Will Nintendo buy them out? Probably not. But, you know, it is worth trying to see if they actually do manage to get that company in their threshold, if they actually do take the incentive to actually get them under their belt. And as we know, back in January, where Nintendo wanted to do more mergers and buyouts, this would probably be their best bet to actually do so. Again, it probably won't happen, but at least we can hope. And Nintendo, if you decide that you do buy out Capcom or buy out 51% of their shares, then please treat them with the same respect as they were back when they first started out, especially with the older franchises and growing into the newer ones as of right now, before Capcom went down that train wreck of what they were before they got themselves into the pickle as they are right now. So Capcom, hopefully there's a brighter future ahead of you, whether if it's Nintendo, Sony, or Microsoft that buys you out. Hopefully you can get back onto the right track and you won't even have to die anytime soon. So anyway, that's all I have to say on the matter, so I want to know what you all think. Do you think Nintendo is a good potential candidate to buy out Capcom shares? But if you don't, and if you feel that there's somebody else who has the power to buy them for the better, then let me know why. Be sure to rate this video as well as leaving your positive and negative feedback down in the comments, and also be sure to hit that subscribe button underneath that video, as more support from you guys means that more content is coming from me in the future that you won't even find anywhere else. And until next time, this is Double RPG signing off by saying Godspeed and Game On Gamers. Have a good one.
You